Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to tonight's stream. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys had a good RTN this weekend. Um, Today, we're going to be having a State of the Union for the Warriors. We are going to be discussing the current positions of all four, the strengths, the weaknesses, as well as going through a matchup chart to help us decide once and for all who is the greatest warrior in Wraith. So, we'll give a couple minutes for people to file in. In the meantime, uh, quickly talk about RTN, and maybe you guys in chat might have a question or two. But we will try to keep today's stream pretty to the point and more concise than normal. We won't be having any gameplay today. We are just going to be discussing the state of the Warriors. So yeah, this weekend I actually got to bring an experimental Bolton list to the Level Up RTN in Georgia, and that was pretty fun. Um, we we ended up third, fourth place there out of like 30 something people. And the list that I brought was basically like kind of like a Casai deck that kind of sprinkled in some of the Bolton combo pieces, and it worked all right. I'm not exactly sure if that's like the best builds of Bolton. I've gotten a lot of questions from people to make a deck tech for Bolton, and the thing is, like, currently there's like so many builds of Bolton, I'm not even like sure which one is the strongest. I still think probably it's a switch style deck that utilizes a higher blue count, leans on some of the strong cards from the newest set like Blade Flurry, maybe includes a couple of other cards like Slice and Dice and stuff like that, but still heavily reliant on the core rating game plan as well. So we'll see how we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, we ended up getting there. We ended up getting our Nats invite, which is nice. You got a RTN this weekend, okay? And how do I feel about the meta? Well, that's a very good question. We're going to be talking all about the meta, actually. So LSS has actually printed, or they have some articles up about the metagame, and we're going to kind of we're going to reference those. We're not going to like, because the thing is with LSS, they've been very clever in how they present the data to us, because they no longer give us metagame share or like how many times a deck was played. They are only giving us how many times a deck has won, which is completely irrelevant without without the number of players playing it. Like, who cares if Kano won 12 CC RTNs if, you know, they were like, if they were 5% of the metagame or 20% of the metagame, that obviously makes a big difference, right? We've classically seen with classes like Illusionist, a lot of them take it to an RTN, but very few convert. This was something that was said for about OG Prism for a very, very long time. This is something that people consistently dog Dromai about, is that it has very, very, very poor conversion rates, but LSS doesn't really post the information for us to dissect, which may or may not be a good thing. Like, the people going into the Pro Tour, I think, basically only have a very, very limited data set, and we're going to go into that in a little bit, that basically I think the only thing we can do right now is divide it into viable and not viable. There really isn't a like, oh, these three decks are like god tier, and then okay, we got some other contenders, and then everything else is not viable. For those of you guys on Twitter, the Twitter discourse these last few days have been, oh my god, the metagame is so open. What are we gonna do? The meta is so open. I can't test against 15 decks. Well, too bad. That's how it is. Hello, Joe. Nice to see you again. You said, I had an absolute epiphany on Sunday. Oh, okay. Driving home from the RTN. Now, driving home from RTNs, you always get some ideas. I'm very curious to see where this comment goes. You audibled off Dory last minute and played Katsu Hyper Aggro, ran through Swiss, and got paired into 70 card Rampart Bravo. Oh no. That's probably not going to be a good matchup there. Pure fatigue and lost to fatigue, shockingly. Okay, so Katsu can be fatigued, apparently. Okay. Josh, are you going to any more RTNs? I will probably go to some RTNs to help my teammates try to qualify. But on the 3-hour ride home, I worked out the idea I thought was impossible. Okay. And I have a working, very solid list that is Hot Streak Saber Dory that full switches into Decimator Expert Guardian. Just like Boost Dash that full sides to pistol control. Interesting. And you're 1000% playing at the next RTN. That's pretty cool. All right. Well, I'm very curious to maybe you can DM me and we can chit chat about that, and maybe I can give you some ideas for that. It looks like there's a little bit of lag on my side. My internet has not been very kind to me these last couple weeks. Hopefully that will all sort itself out soon. Okay, we got some more comments. I'm between Azalea and Dory for mine this weekend. I have all of my Azalea cards, but I think Dory is more consistent. So if I can get the cards, I'd rather play her. Dory does have a very, very stable matchup spread, and people at the RTN level generally don't defend her properly. So I would bring Dory to a RTN as well. In your locals, what is the meta share? Well, I'm about to talk about that. I love the meta being this open. A clear S tier deck that warps everything around it makes the game stale in the long run. It is good if you play the winning deck, but it's horrible if the deck is gatekeeping yours. Yep. This has been the first time in a long time that we haven't had a clear deck. Back in the day, it was Chain, and then it was Starvo, and then it was Icelander, and Phi, and Briar, and the wheel kept turning and turning and turning and turning. And then Lexi most recently, right? I played at Army and 3-0 tonight. It's actually just wild. Very cool. Anytime you could switch between two different strategies, I think that's actually very, very strong. And that's one of the strengths of Warrior. Okay. Because we do not have a lot of time, I am going to jump into tonight's topic pretty quickly. We will be going for about an hour and 15 minutes, and then I need to go commentate on some games. So, are you going to look at the Olympia list? I could briefly talk about it. It's very, very similar to my stream list. Like 70 cards similar. Basically, it's Hatchet's value with a couple wager cards, a couple defensive cards. It's what I suggested as the Olympia deck. So if you guys want to check that out, that list is available on the fabtcg website. You could probably find it in the Purple Discord as well. Do you have a list of your own hybrid hot streak Dawnblade Dory? If yes, my hybrid hot streak Dawnblade Dory list is on the TheCardGuyz channel. You can find that. It is already up. Okay, let's jump into tonight's topic because we don't got that much time. All right, so let's transition here. All right, so LSS, like I said, has been publishing these metagame minutes, right? So in week 1, we saw Kano doing really well, but we saw many heroes doing well, right? I'm not going to get into this. You guys can see with your eyes. Same with week 2. Kano had a pretty good week, but then we saw, Bolton and Levi having a great week. And basically lots of heroes winning, okay? So, now, we are not going to make a tier list. Where I'm going to use this just simply to divide the heroes into 2 groups, right? All right. Basically, I think a lot of people have come to the conclusion, especially testing teams, have basically they haven't concluded or figured out the chain Icelander Lexi of the format, but we have basically been able to put heroes into viable and not viable, and it's very similar to what we're seeing winning RTNs. And it comes down to this very simple split, okay? There are going to be 14 heroes in viable, and there's going to be 11 in not viable. No tier list, you're out. Well, too bad. I'm not making a full tier list. We're going to sort heroes into viable and not viable, and then we're going to fill in this chart that you're a huge fan of, Nathan. All right, so viable heroes. Both Guardians are currently viable. Which one is better? To be seen. They both have their pros and cons. 3 of the Warriors are currently viable. Sorry, Olympia. All 3 Brutes are viable. With so KO was like the week 1 pick, right? People were really high on KO. We had people trying out the Berserk builds. There was a lot of, hype around him. But I think people have started to realize that, like, just the flat numbers in Levia and just how much health she has and just the absurd amount of damage she can output is really good. And then Reinhardt, I think some people have been, quietly looking at him as a viable option. And we've seen that, he's won a couple of RTNs here and there. Okay. So this is what, 3, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so other viable heroes. We have Azalea, we have Dash, we have Dromai, we have Kano, we have Katsu, we have Prism, and I believe that is it. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Yep, 14 here, right? So we have the Guardians, we have the Warriors, we have the Brutes, and then these 6 heroes are all kind of like unique, right? And these are all heroes that, other than Prism, I guess we'll put Prism kind of over here. These heroes here, I guess Kano also should go in a separate category. These 4 heroes here, Azalea, Dash, Dromai, and Katsu, the commonality between them is that they did not get anything major from heavy hitters, but they were still powerful enough to be relevant for like the last couple metas. We've seen Azalea ever since Lexi left, honestly been like a very solid A, possibly even an S tier hero. Dash has been consistently here for like 3 years. Dromai, hate her or love her, she's also been part of the metagame for a very long time. And then Katsu, we've seen that very skilled Katsu pilots can do well in any metagame, very similar to Dash, right? So these 4 heroes all have that commonality. These heroes here all got benefits from heavy hitters, right? So obviously the Guardians, the Warriors, and the Brutes all got benefits from heavy hitters. Prism got Luminaris Angel's Glow, which is major. And finally, Kano basically is good in a metagame where people are less sure about what they're doing. And it was just I think in week 1, there was just like kind of an opening where people were just like, I'm not going to respect Kano. So I was definitely on the disrespect Kano train in week 1 as well. But yeah, basically these heroes I think most pro teams would come to the conclusion, if you saw any of these 14 heroes at Pro Tour 4, you wouldn't be surprised at all. If you saw any of these heroes at Pro Tour 4, you would be very, very surprised. I'm gonna put a few of these in a dark horse tier because these are kind of okay. So Fi and Max, I think, deserve their own like. Okay. Fi won the world championship, and other than getting Stubby's banned, has been like. I think it's just the matchups right now are just not good for Fi, but like Fi has consistent damage output, and I wouldn't be surprised if some people brought Fi to PT4. And then Max, very similar to Fi, is there's some very, very cute builds with Max. Okay, so basically this is where we're at, right? Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but this is roughly what I'm thinking. Okay, Guardian mid JK, both Guardians. Oh, sorry, I forgot about Betsy. My bad. There are 3 Guardians. I would like to play Dromai with you. Interesting. Okay. I mean, oh, that's Wen. Hi. What's up, Wen? Ancestral Harmony, absolutely cracked. Is that? Oh, that's a new card from Heavy Hitters, right? Dash IO before HH was a thing. What do you think changed to make her irrelevant? I think people just started blocking properly. And the fact that brutes are viable basically puts pressure on both dashes, I think. Canon got a new blue card. That is true. Yeah. So okay, so they all got a little bit of something, right? Katsu, Prism, and Kano got something. I guess even Azalea got something, right? Azalea got Judge, Jury, Executioner. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so let's now move into this, okay? So those of you who've been around for a while may recognize this chart, because this is what I like to do when I can't decide between 2 decks. And so basically we have the 4 warriors outlined here. I'm going to go through what I think the ideal build looks like for each of these 4. We have the 14 viable heroes laid out here. This is my predicted metagame share. I could be convinced otherwise. This is just me kind of dividing them into 3 categories. Victor and Dromai, I think, are going to be the most popular at 10%. Bravo, Casai, Bolton, Levia, KO, I think they are 8% each. And then these are 5% each. And this adds up to 95%. So the other heroes would be 5%, right? And so basically, we're going to give each of these a score. And then we will get a raw score, and we'll get an adjusted score. So an adjusted score is basically the score, the individual score here times the metagame share, and we repeat that, and we add them up. And we'll, whichever one of these is the strongest or the highest, is what theoretically, given this metagame share, given these matchup numbers, is the strongest. Okay? All right. So I'm going to talk about these 4 builds here. Okay. So the strongest Dorthia build at the moment, in my opinion, is the Dawnblade mid-ranged style. So this is a deck that is heavily focused on Dawnblade, may or may not have a Decimator Axe in the sideboard, but is not running a full switch package, and basically is running all the new hotness like Blade Flurry, Goblet, maybe a copy of Shift the Tide of Battle, trying to take advantage of grains, trying to take advantage of agility tokens and stuff like that. And this is a deck that is basically trying to snowball with Dawnblade counters and put a lot of the decks in the format in a very, very tough position. The level of D-reacts in this format is actually fairly low, which is a bit surprising considering that Bravo and Azalea are also very good decks. But it's just kind of is that way. And that's one of the good things about Dorthia is that the current metagame does not have an Oldhim. It does not. Fatigue Bravo is not super common. Casai can be built very defensively. Unfortunately, that's a bad thing. But the current metagame is overall fairly good for Dorthia. Dorthia overall, I think, does fine into the Brutes. Has a decent matchup into many, many heroes. And yeah, I think she also rewards being able to play the deck at a high level. Now, one of the things is that I've always been hesitant to bring Dory to a tier 4 event because obviously tier 4 events have the highest level of players. And Dorthia is a deck that does fall off a little bit against skilled opponents, but it comes down, but that could be mitigated by just playing differently and taking different lines. So this is a deck that does reward being able to adjust based on the level of your opponent. This is something I've said many, many times. I'm sure if you've watched me for a long time, you are sick of me hearing me say that, but it is true. All right, next we have the Switch Bolton list. So I guess let me quickly talk about other Dorthia lists that are possible, right? So there is Hatchet's Dorthia. There is Decimator Axe Dorthia. There is a switch style of Dorthia that switches between Dawnblade and Sabers. Joe seemed to have one that switched between Decimator and Sabers, and so there's lots of builds for Dorthia. And that's actually one of the strengths of Dorthia is that because there's a lot of viable builds, that you don't really know what she's going to flip over, right? Unfortunately, for people like me, who are more of a public figure, if I go to Pro Tour 4 and my opponent has watched any of my videos, they are like 99% sure I'm going to flip over Dawnblade. Oh well, is what it is. Anyways, let's talk about Bolton. So the current strongest build for Bolton, in my opinion, is a switch style deck that has a higher than average blue count that incorporates some of the stuff that Casai uses, but I think the deck should still be very, very, very light based in that it actually can run Raiden into certain matchups. So having the ability to switch between Raiden and the Sabers combo is very, very important because there are certain matchups where things are just better when you're playing Raiden. Most Bolton lists are not running enough attack reactions, in my opinion. And this is something that I think we've slowly seen increase over time. We're starting to see Courageous Steel Hand become a more mainstay. We're seeing Resounding Courage, Blade Flurry coming in to supplement Beacon of Victory as well, obviously. And the Bolton decks generally are going to be playing Raiden, except in like 4 or 5, maybe 6 matchups, you're going to be playing Saber combo. And the reason you do this is because most decks in this format cannot block effectively against Bolton when he's charged. If you look at the majority of the metagame here, except for the Warriors and Kano, they're all attack action based, or at least heavily attack action based, like Reinhardt and Azalea. There are certain decks like Prism that just cannot defend for at all, basically, against Bolton. And yeah, Bolton also, some other positives about Bolton has Bolton and Levia are, I guess, also Vincent and Prism. They have access to Spell Void in the head slot, which is really, really important. Hail of Illumination plus, I forgot the name of the shadow one, but the shadow heroes have it as well. That's very, very important. Bolton has access to Soul Shield, which is a really, really, really great card in this format. It helps against Bravo, helps against Azalea, helps against Dorthia, helps against Victor, and it just fits really nicely into the game plan of Bolton. And then you also have the ability to like, his equipment has just improved and improved and improved, and now we're at a point where you could actually run like a full fridge on Bolton as well. So there's many equipment builds for Bolton that are viable. Okay, so that's Bolton. So there's, like I said, there's many builds of Bolton. The current one that I think is the strongest is Switch Bolton. Casai, there's really only 2 builds right now. There's a more offensive and a more defensive mid-range Casai builds, obviously utilizing Saber plus Hot Streak. Sometimes they're running double Saber, but that's rare. So basically both builds are mid-range. One is more defensively focused, one's more offensive focused. So the defensive focused one is less all in on cards like Cash In, Blood on Our Hands, and obviously includes more D-Reacts. The defensive Casai probably is running closer to 12 D-Reacts. So we have like Sync, Fate, That's All You Got, Springboard, Somersault, stuff like that. Could be running Shunt, could be running pseudo D-Reacts like Take It on the Chin and stuff like that. And in general, we've seen the defensive Casai do a little bit better. Obviously, that the issue with playing a defensive Casai is that it makes your matchups more lopsided. You do well into certain decks when you play 12 D-Reacts and you're a very value-based deck that doesn't have attack actions. And you abuse dynamos as well. And of course, you do poorly when into certain decks as well, because you're a 12 D-React deck that can't really put on meaningful pressure and have on hits. I went on a whole long rant last stream about Casai, why I thought she wasn't that great. If you want to go watch that, you could go watch that. That was last week's stream at the beginning. Okay, so there's basically only 2 builds there for Casai. Finally, we have Olympia. Olympia is basically the only build that we've seen have success, and the only build that I thought was remotely viable was the Hatchets Olympia build. This is what we've been doing on stream the last 4 weeks. There was a person who took it to a 9-0 in the Philippines using a very, very similar build. So basically utilizing the Hatchets, utilizing dynamos, utilizing cards with Wager, Double Down, Cash In, some attack reacts, and just a lot of value, solid blocking, and trying to get to a situation where we just basically outvalue them. I've said it many, many times. It's really, 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 really hard to figure out why Olympia is good. And if you play him enough, you just kind of realize, like, I'm just having vigor tokens all the time. I'm having agility tokens here and there. I'm having gold here and there. And I'm just, there's this Cash In, Double Down, and eventually you just get there with value. And it's really, really weird to say why it works, but it does. Hatchets are really, really strong. They are mathematically stronger than the sabers or the swords, because the second axe attack comes in for 3. Okay. Other Olympia builds that are out there. We have the Decimator Olympia build. We have the one that is focused on cards like Wage Vigor, Wage Agility, Wage Gold. I've seen Saber Olympia builds as well. But I think they all pale in comparison to Hatchet's Olympia. Okay. Let's quickly look at chat and then let's fill this in. My round 1, I OTK'd a Kasai turn 4 off a 30-something damage turn with a red. Descendant Gustwave flipped off a Harmony and a Lynx. Can't wait to play with you in Hong Kong. I'm sure we will have many great battles there. I also find Katsu to be Kasai's one of... I also find Katsu to be one of Kasai's worst matchups. She doesn't have much agency. Katsu is pretty much free to set up a massive combo turn, including a must-block Dishonor into Tenacity. Tenacity is actually... I forgot to mention that. Tenacity is a card that has improved Phi and Katsu and Bolton. It's a strong card. All right. Up the volume, Josh, or bring your mic closer. Okay, sure. I can. Let's see if we can. Let's try to be a little bit louder. Yeah, I felt invincible all day until top 8 and got the literal nightmare pairing. Yep. What do you think of using wage cards on Dory and on Bolton? I think they're actually not bad. The wager card that wages agility, I think, is quite decent. And it's a 3-block. And very few heroes in this current format can actually take advantage of a agility token unless they give you armor, which is good. As for Bolton, if it's not a light card, it needs to be really, 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 really strong. Honestly, I think this Saber Hot Streak Dory that can full switch into Axe is the best position in the meta. I'll share my list after RTN. I'm a believer. I'm taking the gold foil. All right, a man full of confidence. All right. Okay, let's break down this chart here. Now, I do have to say, even though people ask me a lot of questions, people trust a lot of the things that I say, I could speak to these two much, much, much more certain. I'm much more certain of Dorthia and Bolton and their matchup spread than Casai and Olympia. Okay? I have played thousands of games with these two heroes. I have played hundreds of games with these two heroes. Okay? So, I am open to doing these two. I'm open to doing the whole thing kind of as a community style thing. Please, if you have opinions, please voice them in the chat. But I do think I will know more about these two than these two. Okay, so let's start here. Okay, so let's talk about the Guardians here. Okay, I guess we'll go with the Guardians and the Warriors and the Brutes, and then we'll kind of go from there. Because a lot of generally, if you're good against a class, it's usually across the board. Okay, Dorthia against Victor. This is actually unfortunately, a very, very, very tough matchup. And the reason is that Dorthia basically can't win clashes, and you have to... Not only does Victor block really, really well, oftentimes Victor could just block at +3 the whole time, and you can't do much about it, which is really, really, really depressing. This is a matchup that I'm going to say is like at maybe 30%, maybe 35% if against... Basically, it comes down to most Victor lists right now are not running a bunch of D-Reacts, but they are running 3 Staunches generally, which is enough to actually stuff most of your big turns. So I'm going to say that's pretty difficult. And I'm going to quickly reference, I'm going to just quickly take a look here. I don't really want to use the Fabry data too much. But okay, so yeah, it's saying it's about 40. Okay, so I'm gonna put this at 3.5 because I think the higher level the victor, the worse it's actually gonna be for Dory. Some things that are good for Dory is that she does have access to a lot of attack reactions, so the closing power of Victor is actually less. But this could be just a case where the Victor just runs the Dorthia out of threats. Yeah. Also, Dorthia is very fragile to CNC Pummel. You can get out of the first one with Crown of Providence, obviously, but in general, Pummel is going to hit Dory, unfortunately. Dory versus Dromai. This is a matchup that used to be favored towards Dromai. Currently, I would say it's actually fine for Dory. I wouldn't say it's amazing. This is a matchup where if they see Rake really early, it's kind of annoying. But I'm going to say it's 50-50. All these three are going to do much worse. The good thing about Dory is that you have a clock and you have on hits, which the on hit is you hit harder on the next turn, which is good. Dory generally has a few poppers, so Dromai does have to take care of that. And having access to Blade Flurry just makes it really difficult for a hero that just doesn't quite have enough armor to deny things. Also, this is a metagame where Chorus of Ironsong, I think, is fine in the main deck. So that's obviously quite nice as well. Bravo. This is another 50-50 matchup. This matchup really comes down to how the Bravo deck is built. Very similar to Oldhim. If they're running 60 reacts, this is favored towards Dory. If they're running 9, it's even. If the Bravo's running 12, it becomes very difficult. But overall, I think it's fine. All right, Dory against Casai. Let me make sure I have my my chat back up. Where'd you guys go? Okay, there you guys. There you guys are. Okay. Dory versus Casai. This is a very even matchup again. This is one that I thought was more Dory favored, but the more I play it, it seems like the Casai decks are becoming more defensive, which is actually very difficult for Dory. And if you don't find the right hand quick enough, and if you don't have access to large attack reactions, and generally you only have like 3 of them, it can be very difficult to push meaningful damage against Casai. Casai could drag the game out very long, and that means Dynamos gets very good value. We might actually even see Dorthia start to run Shatter, because this is kind of an annoying matchup. Okay, next we got Bolton. Dory, I think, is favored against Bolton. Mainly because if they are on combo Bolton, Dorthia has a ton of armor to deny the damage. And Dorthia has a sufficient enough clock that Bolton generally can't just set up triple Lumina. And obviously Dorthia doesn't have attack actions. So I think this is actually maybe even like 6.5 to Dory, I would say. Bolton obviously does have access to Soul Shield and generally is running with Sync and Fate. But I don't think that offsets the fact that that Dory just has like a lot of pressure. And basically, if Bolton wants to make a move, Dorthia is going to get a counter. Also, Puncture is kind of a blowout generally, especially mid to late game. So that's a fairly common line. We also see that Route against Reinforced Line is obviously disgusting. Yeah, I'd put it about 6.5. Levia, this is a tricky one here. I'd say Levia. Now, the tricky thing is that Levia basically has to kind of have a bad turn somewhere during the game for Dorthia to have a chance. The thing is, if Dorthia can ever get tempo, it's very, very difficult for Levia to take it back. Husk obviously is good, but now that we have access to Blade Flurry, it's less good. And Levia generally is not running D-Reacts, and this is something we're going to see as a commonality between Levia and KO. I think the fact that they don't run D-Reacts and the fact that Levia basically... Levia has to seed counters to 5-card Dory generally once she has Blood Debt. Creates a situation where the late game becomes very difficult for Levia. So I'd say it's... Oh, by the way, these are out of 10, right? So this is kind of like fighting game style. Like, if you play 10 matches, how many would you win out of 10, right? Okay, KO. This one I think is even better for Dory, mainly because KO has slightly less damage and slightly worse armor than Levia. And once you get around the armor of KO, similar to Levia, doesn't run D-Reacts. Okay, Reinhardt. Now Reinhardt is actually very, very interesting because the way that Reinhardt used to be built, this was not good for Dory. But currently, most Reinhardts are more aggressively slanted. So in the past, I'd say this was like 45, 55 to Dory. Or, yeah, 45 to Dory. Reinhardt... I haven't played this matchup post heavy hitters. That's kind of the issue. So I don't know. Do you have any of you guys in chat played this matchup? Because I haven't played this one yet. I'm gonna say it's about 50-50 though, because Reinhardt does run some D-Reacts, and there are situations where Reinhardt could drop very low and then kill you with a very, very large Blood Rush Spell. Oh boy, Kano. I have played this matchup a lot. This is because Kanos love to spam games on Talishar, and they often are only 6 minutes long. If you have Oasis, AB2, take it on the chin. These obviously help. But Dorthia actually puts quite a bit of pressure on Kano, even without like cards like Jubil. And Dorthia is very unique in that you can put lethal on the stack and then they have to respond to it. And if you are holding multiple cards with AB2, you generally can live at about like 5 to 10 health. This is a knowledge-based matchup, obviously. But Kano runs 0 D-Reacts. They have no armor. They have 30 life. So, and given that Dorthia just has so much consistency now in terms of go again and attack reacts, Kano can be dead in 3 turns easily. I think the important thing, though, is having AB2. Having access to AB2 is a lifesaver in this matchup. This is a matchup I used to run AB. Now I think you basically shouldn't be disrespecting Kano as Dory because, well, Kano has started to show up at more RTNs. I think this is like... So if you go second as Dory, I think you're like 55% to win. If you go first, I think you're like 45 or 50 to win. So I'm going to say this is like ever so slightly Dory favored. 5.25. All right, Dash. Now this one is really, really interesting because I think this one actually depends on the level of your Dash opponent. Also, whether you go first or second. That's also very, very important. If you're going first, that's obviously huge because then they can't start with induction, chamber, arsenal, unmovable. That's obviously bad. So there is a style of dash that is very, very, very effective against Dorthia. I am not going to tell you what that is because I don't want more people to know what it is. But I have played against it, and it is very, very effective. But very, very, very few people utilize this style of dash. Okay. I think if we're talking about the mainline plan of dash, which is to play defensive, set up items, this is probably 55 to Dory, especially if you start first. If you start first, I think this is closer to 60, but as it stands, basically because they only have because mech doesn't have a class D react, they're going to struggle. And in order for them to set up items, they basically only have 2 cards to block. And Dorthia is basically throwing 5 cards hands into dash. Yeah. All right. Next, we got Azalea here. Azalea, this is a matchup that I think is slightly Dory favored. The reason is most Azaleas don't have D-Reacts, and you have a sufficient fridge, especially with grains now, to deny an on-hit and pivot. And once Azalea gets on the back foot, it's very, very difficult for them to recover. Yeah. All right, Dory versus Dory is obviously 50-50. Dory versus Katsu, I think this is actually a bad matchup. I think this is actually a really bad matchup. And one of the reasons is that not really bad. I'm going to say this is like 4.5. The reason this is a bad matchup, maybe even, I'm going to put this at 4. Like, that's a good Katsu. So the reason Dory against Katsu is a issue is if the Katsu is built with a couple of defensive cards, they basically can put enough pressure on you that you can't strike back with a 5-card hand. And then as long as they have like a couple 3 blocks and a D react, they can easily take care of your offense, and you get chipped down, and you basically have to take a risky line as Dory. You basically have to wait for the Katsu to brick, which I don't like as a strategy in general. And yeah, Kadachi's just get very, very annoying once your armor is gone. Mask of Momentum is obviously very, very annoying. Cards like Ancestral Empowerment obviously can push over and get there. Very, very, very annoying. Finally, Prism. I think this is also a pretty bad matchup. The reason being is that Dory only runs 3 poppers. The Heralds eventually break through your armor. The Arc-like Sentinel is very, very strong against Dorthia and basically can reset the counters. So there's that. Okay, so if we add up all this, we should get 70.75, so it rounded up. And so if we expect to go into this field, apparently we will only win 48% of our games. Okay. So there's that. I think that was a fair assessment of Dory. Let's see if you guys agree here. I think Dory is the counter makes such a race. Ken has to poke and take damage. Yeah, you're talking about against Kena. I think Dory's slightly favored. What is AB2? AB2 is Arcane Barrier 2. So for Dorthia, that would be the that'd be the head and arm slot. Oh yeah, another thing is that this is a very volatile matchup because you can draw 4 reds and then you just lose the game. Dual wield Dory with AB3 puts a lot of pressure, sure. Do you think the blue majestic that blows up reactions from Arsenal can help against the Guardians? I think it does. Emboldened Blade is very, very key. Is a really atypical dash build that our favorite? It's not an atypical dash build. It is a typical dash build that I think is very good in Dodori. But I don't want to give away the secret sauce. I don't want dash players beating Dory. I've gone back to playing Time Snap and Dory because of Prism. Yeah, Time Snap does help. Gets you out of the ALS loop as long as you have a CNC. Dual wielding into Kano is unfavored no matter the hero. I agree with that. The dual wielding, like Casai and Olympia, are going to do worse. Katsu is a rough matchup for Dory now. I missed the rationale on that. Katsu, a good Katsu is never going to let you keep a 5-card hand. And if you mess up your defense once as Dory, you often fall too far behind. If you have tempo against Katsu, sure. If they brick, sure, you're in it. But I think in general this is against high level Katsus, I've had a lot of problems. And it might just be me. I might just suck against Katsu. I don't know. Popped in when you talked about Dromai. What's with Victor again? Well, you can't win clashes, and you all like that he blocks really well, and it's just there's just a lot of value from Victor, and it's really, really tough to overcome that value. 3 staunch responses generally shut down your big turns, and often you get into a late game that's just like you just don't have enough gas to win the game if they block. Katsu doesn't even play with momentum anymore. Exactly. They don't have to play with massive momentum. They can go with links to guarantee a bunch of damage because basically if you don't block, they grab Salt the Wound. You do block, they grab Tenacity. And that's basically what happens there. All right. We got about half an hour, so I better hurry the hell up here because I do have to go at 9:30. So I'm going to quickly go through Bolton and Casai and Olympia here. All right. Switch Bolton against Victor. So against both Guardians, this is actually should be fine. I'd say probably 55 for Victor and maybe 60 for Bravo. Traditionally, Raiden Bolton has been good against Guardians. Dromai, this is a complete nightmare. This is 3 at best. 3 out of 10 games, maybe you can get there. You basically have to high roll with Raiden or YOLO with with Courage of Bladehold and see if you can combo them really, really quickly. One of the issues is that Sigil puts them out of range, and it's just really, really difficult. And you obviously, and sometimes you have to send damage at the dragon, so you're not actually sending damage at their face. So, and it just they can extend the game if they see a quick rake. That's really bad for you. Bolton against Casai. This is, oh man, this is actually I think a little bit tough for Bolton. I'd say this is probably like a 3.5. I actually think Bolton is not favored at all into Casai. So the interesting thing is if we write 3.5 here, we actually need to write 6.5 here. Okay. So the reason why this is favored towards Casai is because unless you're talking about like unless you have blues in your deck and you can go for a Warband of Bolana triple Lumina combo, Casai is not going to die to the Lumina combo. If you play Raiden against Casai, the deck just blocks too well against all the breakpoints with Dynamos. And Bolton can't end the game quickly against a deck that's blocking. And you could get fatigued, especially with the 12D React Casai builds. Bolton against Bolton is obviously 50-50. Bolton against the Brutes. Uh, I think overall it is ever so slightly Bolton favored in basically all of these. Um, but this is if you're running uh, Raiden. If you're running the combo into the brutes, you're taking a giant coin flip that you will see Spirit of Arena very, very quickly. Because if you don't see Spirit of Arena quickly, you cannot combo a brute because of Scowling Fleshbag. They know it, you know it. But Raiden Bolton basically has comparable damage to brutes, comparable equipment to brutes, but you're presenting a couple on hits, and Lumina is very, very annoying for them to block. And you just in general or do okay against them. And yeah. Bolton against Kano. This one's actually very, very interesting. So basically, if you build your Bolton deck correctly, you probably should be slightly favored. I'm not going to say you're very favored, but I'm going to say like maybe 57% favored. So Bolton can be built with. So this is actually an evolution of Bolton theory. So in the past, the theory was that you run Spell Void 4, AB1. So you 2 on the Halo, 2 on the boots, and then Null Ring Gloves. And then you combo them out. However, that is very vulnerable to the style of Kano that just chips you down and then tries to end the game with like a medium level wildfire, right? So the stronger strategy now, actually, I think, is Spell Void 2 AB2. Very similar to Dorinthia's plan, but with Halo. So I think if you run Spell Void 2 with the Halo, Null Rune Gloves, Null Rune Boots, you'll actually do better as Bolton. Obviously, things like Spellbound Resolve would help. Banner of Protection would help. This is a matchup that the way Bolton's built is slightly favored towards Bolton, but there are ways that you could build Bolton to just slam the door on Kano if you really wanted to. Okay, Bolton against Dash. This is a pretty solid matchup overall. The only threat here is that this is assuming Raiden Bolton into Boost Dash, right? This matchup could get very, very weird very, very quickly based on the amount of based on the build of Bolton and the build of Dash, right? Because we have Raiden Bolton, we have Combo Bolton, we have Boost Dash, we have Slab Dash. Nobody's really running the defensive package Dash against Bolton, right? So if you're playing Combo Bolton, you basically auto win against Slab Dash. If you're playing Raiden Bolton, you auto lose against Slab Dash. If you're playing Raiden Bolton against Aggro Boost Dash, you're slightly favored, but things can be volatile. And if you're playing combo into Aggro Dash, that's also, you know, whether or not they find their harpoons at the right time, and that one can be interesting as well. So this one actually has overall, I'd say it's slightly Bolton favored, but this one actually has a lot more nuance than it looks. Azalea, this is an unfavored matchup here for Bolton. Reason being, you do have access to a good amount of defensive tools, but there's really no need for Azalea to block most of Bolton's stuff. In order to have a decent turn, you basically have to keep 4 cards. Like if you want a Lumina turn, you'd probably have to keep 4 cards. So it's just a bad situation there. A lot of the on hits are really, really detrimental to Bolton. And yeah, this might even be lower than this. This might be maybe 4.25. I really think this matchup's actually very tough, and it's just the fact that you don't put enough pressure on him. Okay, Bolton against Dorthia. Like I said, because it's 3.5 or 6.5 there, it should be 3.5 here. Already talked about this matchup. Quick summary is that Dory doesn't give Bolton go again very easily, and if you're playing combo Bolton, Dory has enough speed to pressure you, and the combo doesn't kill Dory. If you're playing Raiden, you have to play defensive cards, and if you're playing defensive cards, you can't play Raiden effectively into Dory, and you can get fatigued. Okay, Bolton into Katsu. This one's interesting. This one is really interesting, and this is one I'm not entirely sure about. I think it should be very similar to Azalea in that, like, this is not amazing for either style. I think you could be running combo into Katsu, but I don't know if your armor holds long enough against Katsu. Plus, on your combo turn, you have to pray that they basically don't have sufficient defense. Okay, and then finally, Bolton against Prism. This one, I think, is good. This one's pretty good for Bolton. So Prism can't defend for crap against charged Bolton. Bolton has access to a good amount of poppers, and there are 7 power poppers. That's very, very important. Okay, so so apparently overall Bolton is a little bit worse than Dory. Okay. Bolton versus Kano, if you are playing Resolve, Halo, and the Banneret, that makes him... It is miserable for Kano to combo off. Yep, exactly. Yeah, you have to bait him hard, which is hard to do. I think Bolton beats Kano easy. I also think Bolton can be built to beat Kano easily. I think the current builds are not heavily favored, but if you build it, it can be heavily favored. Playing against Bolton, I usually combo in my own turn with Lesson on Lesson into Blazing. Yeah, that's actually interesting. Yeah. Seeing the chart makes me feel that Dory is better, but playing and looking what heroes can do on paper, Bolton feels way more versatile and capable to overcome his weaknesses. The Bolton deck has more ways to be built. That's kind of the thing. So even though it's a little bit lower here, you know, with the Bolton actually has more sideboard slots than Dory does, which is the interesting thing. All right. We're running out of time. I don't even know if we can finish this week. We may actually have to postpone these two till next time. Because I don't think in 22 minutes I can cover all these sufficiently. So we might just break this stream into 2. Yeah, I think that's better than trying to rush through these 2 here. Okay, so right now both of these are actually below 50%. That's not good, guys. I think Dorinthia's matchup spread is a little bit more stable as well, which is interesting. Okay, I guess we can just try to go through them. I mean, if this does go to 9:30 though, I will be getting off. So, all right, Casai against Victor. Okay, so this is where I need you guys to help out a little bit, right? So, Dory and Bolton, I pretty much I've played these matchups a bunch. I know roughly how it feels. Casai and Olympia, though, I haven't played as much, so you know, you guys can help me here. Let's start with Casai versus Victor. So, I've heard and I felt that this is roughly 50-50. because they're both value-based decks and neither of them can kill each other very quickly. The Kasai has a lot of D-reacts generally and has some burst damage, so very, very unlikely that either deck can fatigue the other deck, but it does. This is a matchup that takes a very, very long time to complete. Yeah, and I don't see like, I mean, Kasai. If we get into late game, Kasai is probably slightly favored, but yeah, Kasai is just a bad dual wielding Dory chase I've had. Okay. Okay. I think the Katsu matchup is Bolton favored, but I'd defer to your experience. Oh, it's I I will admit this column here. This could be just me being bad against Katsu, but I've always felt like these like Katsu's been surprisingly difficult for Dorthia and for Bolton. All right, Kasai against Dromai. How low do we want to put this, guys? 1.5, 2? How horrendous is this matchup, guys? I'm gonna be generous and put it at 2.25. If you build and dedicate a ton of slots, maybe you can get there as Kasai, but I don't know. 2.5, 1.5, 0.5. So you mean it'll win 5 out of 100 games. Oh, man. 2.5 to 3. Okay. So I think most Kasais now realize that they have to dedicate some sideboard slots to it. Okay. We'll put it at a 3. Okay. Mainly because if you have these sideboard slots allocated to Dromai, you can do okay. What does defensive MR mean? That means defensive mid-range. So that means you take the mid-range Kasai deck list and you add defensive cards. Victor can't block if Kasai plays properly. I feel great into Victor. Interesting. Dromai just makes Kasai a golden sand for their Kyloria. Kasai's like 40-60 into Dromai, maybe even 50-50. You can build Kasai to win versus Dromai. Only takes 4 slots. Really? -1 if they play 10 games, Kasai loses 11. If I fist fight the Dromai before the match, I have a good shot at Kasai versus Dromai. The recent stream match that went 40-0 was hard to watch. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Against Bravo, I feel like most Kasai to Bravo. Maybe 6, maybe actually it's like 6.5, maybe. This is one of the best matchups for Kasai because you have the armor of Warrior, you have the defensive tools of Warrior and just of the defensive deck. And Sabers are just hella annoying for Bravo. And you have those burst damage turns. So I feel like most of the time Kasai is fine into Bravo and it feels pretty smooth. Kasai into Kasai is obviously 50-50. All right, Kasai into Brute. This is actually one of the largest sections here and one of the sections that has changed the most, right? So I'm gonna say she's actually probably like probably 60% into all of them, but I actually think that's because the current Brute builds just aren't putting any D-reacts in their deck, and I guess that's just how it is, right? If you want to build your deck to be explosive, that's the price of power, right? Okay. I'm gonna put this at like 5.75. I think it's slightly favored, but maybe not as high as that. All right. Casai against Kano. We've already talked a lot about why this is horrendous. Do we even give them a 3, guys? Or are we giving them less than a 3? Maybe 3.5 might be reasonable. Casai can speed up, but I don't know if the defensive style Casai can actually speed up. That's the issue. So maybe we'll just leave them at a 3. I think 6+ is accurate against Bravo. Yeah, I put 6.5. Maybe I just suck that Brute has not felt great into Casai. Yeah, I think Casai is favored into all the Brutes. Mainly because they don't get good value out of their armor, because there's not that many on hits. And once their armor's gone, then Casai is like gold and copper on hits, start doing a lot of work. 3 is generous. 2. Death 2 or less. Oh, 2. All right. So I guess against good Kanos, this is I think against bad Kanos, this might be 3. Against good Kanos, it's probably 2. Kasai against Dash. All right, let's think about Kasai versus Dash. So I'm guessing most of the Dashes are going to be playing boost Dash into Kasai, which means they're not going to be blocking much, which means Kasai's this probably plays very similar to the Brutes. So we'll give them an advantage there. Kasai against Azalea. This is probably pretty tough. I feel like because you don't have any on hits, and I mean you do have defensive cards, but eventually they run out. It's like, and I don't see a world where Kasai fatigues Azalea, but yeah, it's very similar to the Bolton problem, is that you don't present something that's like actually a problem for them. Kasai against Dory. We already put that here as 50-50. Kasai against Katsu. Oh boy. I think all the warriors in general are not favored against Katsu at the moment, but I'm not sure to what degree. This is a matchup I haven't played, so I'm not sure. Has anybody played Kasai versus Katsu? Let's see here. Kasai has a ton of reds and yellows, no on hits, no pressure. Yeah, we talked about all this. I would put it at like 2 or 1, a good Kano like Pro Tour 4 level. What can Kasai even do? Yeah. Kasai favored into Dash. Yes, I agree. Dash has felt favored. Prioritize copper or cell swords. Okay. Similar to Brutes, except Dash has no. Yeah. Dash and the Brutes are basically the same game plan. Yep. I think Katsu's great into Kasai. I also think so as well, but I'm not sure to what degree. Yeah. 40-60 Katsu favored. Yeah. WebAm says Katsu free. Really? Dynamos makes it free. Interesting. So, I mean, don't the Katsus just adjust to the Dynamos? Basic Kasai is playable because of the Brute meta share. Too many Brutes, good pick. Not that many bad pick. Yes, that's basically what it comes down to. Kasai has very bad matchups, but is generally good into like brutes, dash, bravo. So that's why I think people like her. Makes a big difference whether they're playing links or momentum. That is true. Yeah. All right, well, I think we'll just put it at 4.25. And then Prism here, this is a pretty bad matchup in my opinion. You're so slow, you could get ALS looped. Eventually, I mean, so you have very few poppers in general. You have dynamos, which helps against the War Tune Herald reds, the protection reds. You could clear a decent amount of stuff. And Prism doesn't block very well against your deck, but I still don't think it's really that great. I think it should be like slightly Prism favored, but I'm not sure to what degree. Maybe 4.5 would be reasonable. Okay. Let's see. Kasai, the Big Boy Slayer, yeah. I actually think Prism is free. Interesting. You think Prism is a free matchup for Kasai? Slab Dash is unfavored. Yeah, Slab Dash should be unfavored for Kasai. Because Kasai doesn't have any item destruction. Prism is Kasai favored in my opinion. You just have to keep them off their soul. So that's the general plan of Warriors, to keep them off cards and soul, but because you don't have very many poppers, your armor only lasts so long. I think Kasai could grind it out if you prioritize appropriately. Okay. So maybe this is closer to 5 then. 50-50 then. Okay. I could see it. Playing Prism against it feels good, huh? Okay. All right. Okay, so I guess we will leave the Olympia one for next time. But spoiler alert, he's not going to be as good as the into these. I still think Olympia is really, really fun though. So, and I think he isn't as bad as people think he is. Okay, so this is actually the state for these warriors here. So, mathematically, it looks like Dory is slightly better. Now, it really comes down to this predicted metagame share here, right? Obviously, this is not correct, but I think it's a reasonable. I think this is like reasonable, right? I already talked about why I think these 14 heroes are the heroes that you're most likely to see at PT4. I think these metagame shares are roughly in the right ballpark. I don't think we're going to have a PT1 situation. But yeah, this is kind of the meta. This is kind of like the breakdown of all the matchups here. Okay, let's have a couple minutes to chit chat here, and then I got to get going. I think Kasai has to play 6 poppers for Illusionist. Most lists right now are only running 3. So that's, yeah. Adding a couple poppers definitely will help your Illusionist matchup. Matchup is very draw order dependent. They can ALS loop you by turn 5 or 6 if the draw is reasonable, and you need poppers and good aggression to keep them suppressed. Yep. I mean, the fact that they have 32 life is a thing, but I think the defensive-based Kasai list can't speed up to the degree that it needs to. Dynamo helps a lot with the breakpoints, that is true. But eventually your armor does run out, which is the issue. If they're throwing 2 heralds a turn at you, you're going to have to give armor, which is kind of the issue. Prism versus Kasai comes down to how good the Prism is. A lot of matchups do that. Would you say that KO is maybe a 10%? of the meta. I think people have slightly dropped off of him, but I'm not sure why. I think people are realizing that Levi and Reinhardt have a lot of the same upside, and their Blood Rush Bellow turns are better. So I think we're seeing a shift more towards Levi and Reinhardt, but I could be wrong. Bring KO up to 15%, drop Dromai to 5, and Prison to 3. You really think Dromai at Pro Tour 4 is going to be less than 5? Like, it's going to be 5%. I mean, people love their Dromai. Can you switch to the Control Phi tab for a sec? Okay, I'll show you the other two tabs, guys, okay? So for those of you wondering about the history here, this is Pro Tour 1's metagame share. So I don't think we're going to have anything like this. And here you go. The Pro Tour Control Phi deck list top secret. Just arrived. What's MR? MR is mid-range. Here, let me type it out. There you go. To your fans that don't have as many reps on Warrior, should we keep practicing or look for new heroes? I mean, it depends what level you're playing at. If you're looking for a Pro Tour deck, all three of these are probably decent. I don't think there's anything in the metagame that's like crushingly 60% plus. So having a deck that's like average into the field is gonna be fine. I've always been an advocate of just playing what you love to play. But Levi is way harder to play than the other brutes. It can be stronger, but not everyone is man's hand for Pioneer. Is Levi harder to pilot than the other brutes? I don't know. I've hardly ever played brutes. I don't know. Wow, I'm gonna run that. You're gonna run the Kadachi Phi control Phi deck list? I would have rather been rickrolled than baited with a Control Phi list. So what you're saying is I should just put Rick Astley's face right here, right? I'll do that next time. Dory is the cutest. I don't know, man. There's some people are into brunettes, some people are into blondes. Honestly, I'm really shocked Kasai is unfavored in Azalea. I always felt it was closer to 50-50. The issue is that Azalea doesn't have to block you. Very similar to Bolton. If Azalea doesn't have to block you, they could find disruption on the next turn, or, you know, they basically have to brick real hard. I don't know if it's Levi being harder or being clunkier. That's a good point. I'm not sure if Brute is hard or is clunky. That is a very good way to put it. Frailty and Dominate is hard against Azalea. Yep. Levia is considerably harder to pick up, at least. Graveyard management is not something you just get. Levi is for sure the hardest brute to pilot. I just know it's not KO. Reinhardt, I think the end games for Reinhardt can be very complicated, but I'm not so sure. All right, to counter the clunkiness, you have to manage more variables, making it harder to work with and make it consistent. Yep. All right, thanks for the breakdown. Was fun. Got to run. Yep, I also have to run too. I think it's just free if Azalea doesn't want to block you. Just means you get to play value. What can Warriors do to make the Katsu matchup better? I'm not exactly sure. Having access to sync below Fate Foreseen definitely helps, but it really comes down to defending really well and making the game last enough turns that you know what they've played, what they've pitched, and then you can narrow down. Especially cards like Ancestral Empowerment is really important. This round's on me could, yeah, that could definitely help. Love that Josh is taking up the Levi YouTuber mantle. What? That ain't me. What are you talking about? Okay, guys. We will fill out this one next week here. But for now, basically, most of the Warriors are about even. Basically, if you want a stable matchup, play Dory. If you want the ability to modify your sideboard based on the metagame, play Bolton. If you want some good matchups and some bad matchups, play Casai. If you're an absolute Chad, play Olympia. That is basically the summary, guys. All right. I'm going to get going and cast some games with the man in chat, actually. All right, guys. This has been Josh Lau with TheCardGuyz. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's stream. I hope you guys have gotten something out of today's stream. We talked about all of the Warriors, their pros, their cons. We talked about which heroes we thought were viable for PT4, which heroes we thought were not viable for PT4. And we talked about all the different matchups for the 3 main Warriors of Wraith. All right. I'm getting out of here. Take care. Bye-bye.